people appear before a judge on drug charges. One is charged with simple possession of 5 grams of crack cocaine, 5 grams. The other one is charged with 100 times more the amount, 100 times more, 500 grams of powder cocaine. Who do you think should get the longer sentence? The one with 5 grams of crack or the one with 500 grams of powder cocaine?
Well, I would think the larger, because there might be the intent to sell.
Since the 1980s, people have been going to federal prison for low-level offenses and staying there for a long time. 5 grams, the equivalent weight of 2 sugar packets, subjects defendants accused of possessing crack cocaine to a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years. Regardless of the circumstances of a defendant's case, judges have no authority to sentence below these mandatory sentences. Crack the disparity. It's not fair. It's not working.
What is the first racial group that comes to your mind when you hear the term crack cocaine? First racial group that comes to your mind?
African Americans.
You know what I'm going to say, come on.
African American community. Black folk.
Well, I'm not saying that I feel this way, but I think the media makes it out to be African American.
Well, I think the majority of the crack cocaine users, you would think that they were primarily African American, but I think it's across the board.
African Americans are people of color.
Take action.
$50 grams is the weight of a candy bar. It's the weight of a candy bar. This is a totally insignificant quantity.
How much crack cocaine do you think a defendant needs to end up in prison for 5 years? How about 10 years? What does it mean to be equal? Crack the disparity. It's not fair. It's not working.
The weight of about 2 sugar cubes gets you the same 5-year mandatory minimum penalty as trafficking 500 grams of the powder form of cocaine, which is equivalent to about a 1-pound bag of sugar. For the life of me, I have not understood that.
What is the first racial group that comes to your mind when you hear the term crack cocaine? First racial group that comes to your mind?
African Americans.
Say it again.
African Americans.
Obviously, you know what I'm going to say, come on, it's black, so.
African American community. Black folk.
Well, I'm not saying that I feel this way, but I think the media makes it out to be African Americans.
Well, I think the majority of the crack cocaine users, you would think that they were primarily African American, but I think it's across the board.
At the end of the day, I'm not sure how important it is to think about, well, were the people who passed this law racist in their intent? I think the answer is no, they weren't racist in their intent, including the many white Republicans who voted for it. It was foreseeable that it was going to result in many more African Americans being locked up.
Like Eric Sterling, several of those who supported the law in the 80s now see the harm in having sent thousands of people to prison for low-level offenses and are now taking action by advocating reform.
But the law obviously has this all mixed up.
Who will come with me? Who will come with you? Who will come with the families to march and to advocate for a change that will save lives? God bless you. God bless the United States of America.
Take action.
Being killed just for being associated with people who were involved in that lifestyle. Families were fractured.
These federal drug sentencing laws were intended to punish major traffickers, but the small quantities that trigger mandatory minimum sentences for crack cocaine have primarily entangled street-level sellers, lookouts, and couriers. As a result, thousands of young blacks are incarcerated while the drug trade persists. Taxpayers' dollars are being spent on low-level dealers, and the traffickers maintain their business.
At the end of the day, I'm not sure how important it is to think about, well, were the people who passed this law racist in their intent? I think the answer is no. They weren't racist in their intent, including the many white Republicans who voted for it. It was foreseeable that it was going to result in many more African Americans being locked up. But again, at the time, I think the thought was that that's in the best interest of the community. We just didn't know it would have this result that, for example, in Baltimore, half of the young black men have a criminal case.
Like Eric Sterling, several of those who supported the law in the 80s now see the harm in having sent thousands of people to prison for low-level offenses and are now taking action by advocating reform.
But the law obviously has this all mixed up. The law talks about cocaine and cocaine base. This law all comes from 1986, and I helped write this law as counsel to the House Judiciary Committee.
Indeed, more than 60% of federal crack cocaine defendants in 2006 had only low-level involvement in drug activity.
You know, government doesn't do everything that's right. We all know that. But sometimes it does some things that are just outrageous. And the disparity of 1 to 100, a sentence of 19 years or 24 years or 19 years again, is truly outrageous.
Cocaine in general and crack in particular reached an epidemic proportion in some communities that something needed to be done. And no one would dispute that. That's around the time that I was a prosecutor. So I agree, something needed to be done with cocaine in general, but what was done, this draconian sentencing regime, just had horrible consequences, especially in the African American community.
But we have allowed this disparity in crack cocaine to just sit along the wayside.
I mean, that's all that matters. I'm like, that doesn't even sound right.
In 1989, Kemba Smith met Peter Hall while a 19-year-old sophomore at Hampton University. After having been raised in a protective, middle-class community near Richmond, Virginia, Smith spent the next 4 years in an abusive relationship with Hall. He was 8 years older and the leader of a crack cocaine ring. Due to the harsh mandatory minimum sentences for crack cocaine and associated federal conspiracy laws, Smith was sentenced to 24 years in prison as a first-time nonviolent offender. The court would not consider that her failure to report Hall was because she feared for her life.
Due to my relationship with a particular individual who was a drug dealer while I was a student at Hampton University, kind of got caught up in the wrong crowd, and the relationship ended up turning abusive. Initially, I didn't know to the full complexity of his involvement or the drug trade, but after the abuse occurred, there were certain things that I did know that he participated in. I would see him come on campus and pick up other upperclassmen women who were on the dean's list or in sororities. And I believe, you know, when I eventually became his girl, that I pretty much thought the same way some of those other young ladies felt as far as, you know, what he did was his business and what my thing was school. But ultimately, like I mentioned previously, that the relationship turned abusive. There were certain things that I did do that were involved with the conspiracy. The prosecutor handling my case said that I never handled, used, or sold any of the drugs that were involved. But yet and still, the federal government still held me accountable for 255 keys of crack cocaine.
It's not fair. It's not working. Washington, D.C. resident Karen Garrison is all but too familiar with the unfair sentencing laws. She sees firsthand the racial disparity and effects of long-term, unfair prison sentences. She has twin sons, Lawrence and Lamont, who following graduation from college in 1998 were sentenced and incarcerated in federal prison for 15 and 19 years respectively.
When they were charged with 1 count cocaine, it was powder. By the time it came to sentencing, they changed it to crack because that's the trick. It gives you more time.
The twins' college professor from Howard University wrote a letter appealing to the trial judge for leniency. Lawrence and Lamont do not belong in jail.
A fair punishment Because first and foremost, I understand that I broke the law. I was wrong. I should have been sent to prison. Make no mistakes about it. But at the same time, 20 years for selling $2,500 worth of drugs.
It's not fair. It's not working.
I believe that a person's criminality should be determined on their own individual conduct.
Their sentencing could be different.
It should be equal.
Take action. It's not fair. It's not working.
When we spend more money to have people in jail than send them to universities, we've got a long ways to go.
If God can give us a chance, why can't you all?
Michael Short and Kemba Smith have each testified on Capitol Hill for crack cocaine sentencing reform.
I speak across the country telling young people about the poor choices that I made, hoping that they can learn from my experiences. But at the same time, I feel as if, you know, President Clinton gave me executive clemency. He recognized the problem. You know, I just think that there should be some things done on a larger scale.
Who will come with me? Who will come with you? Who will come with the families to march and to advocate for a change that will save lives? God bless you. God bless the United States of America.
What do you think would happen if I were to put this on there? It would fall down. It would fall down. Let's see. Let's see what happens. Oh, why didn't that happen?
I don't know because it's big.
Why didn't, you don't know?
We don't know.
How could it be? That's something smaller. That's only weighs 5 grams. Could be heavier than something that's is so much bigger. Why aren't they equal?
Because that one is going up and that one is going down.
Yeah, but why? Shouldn't this be heavier?
That one's heavier and that one's lighter, but I don't know why.
According to the United States Sentencing Commission, an independent bipartisan body of judges and legal experts appointed by the president, revising the crack cocaine thresholds would better reduce the sentencing gap than any other single policy change, and it would dramatically improve the fairness of the federal sentencing system. Take action.
It's not working. It's not fair. It's not working. It's not fair. It's not working. No. No, 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 no. It's not fair. It's not working. No. It's not working. It's not fair. No. No.